Shout out to the Cowboys. Rookie minicamp going to be starting on Friday.
About time. We already have rookie minicamps that have concluded around the NFL. Let's go.
That's true. We'll get our first look at Mozzie Smith in a Dallas Cowboys uniform, albeit in jersey and shorts this week. But at the same time, going to be interesting to see the big man out there.
You know what he's going to look like?
What's that?
Big.
That's good call.
I was actually listening to an interesting, I think it might have been Dominique Foxworth at ESPN that was making this point. It's a really good one, though. The learning curve for defensive tackle in the NFL is very small, right? Because, like, there's not much that, like, a defensive philosophy or, like, a defensive scheme, there's not much that's going to change for the defensive tackle, right? Interior defensive lineman, are you big? Can you muscle that dude across from you? That's basically what it's going to come down to. Of course, like, the addition of trying to, like, work on pass rush is going to be important, particularly to Mozzie. And just as he develops, maybe throughout the season and also throughout his career. But are you big and are you strong? Right? Like, it's not going to be like, hey, can you stunt or, like, can you cover? We're not doing all that other stuff. So, like, the idea of, is he going to be a good pick for you? Like, I feel like the bust potential is incredibly low here. Incredibly low. Is he going to show up and be big? Cool. Yeah, it worked out.
And we'll get to see him on Friday as the Cowboys open up rookie minicamp. What did we learn about the NFC East this offseason? This coming from the Ringer. Several statements about these teams that I found very interesting. We'll get to the Cowboys here momentarily, but let's start with the other teams in the NFC East before we get there. And we'll start, speaking of New York, we'll start with the Giants, because the statement that's made by the Ringer here is they're taking a gamble on Daniel Jones's upside. Now, remember, this is a team that gave Mr. Jones a 4-year, $160 million contract. Where have you heard that contract number before? Dak Prescott. With $82 million fully guaranteed. They are taking a gamble on Daniel Jones, because I don't know if that is the move that they needed to make. The franchise tag would have made sense for him, I think, but they decided to go ahead and go all in on Daniel Jones to the tune of $40 million. And remember, the last 3 seasons, Daniel Jones has played in more games than he has touchdown passes.
Yeah, and this is the tough part about it, right?
In each of the last 3 seasons.
Sorry, didn't mean to step on you.
No, you're right. You're good.
You did a great job. Betting on Daniel Jones to be sufficient is one thing. Betting on Daniel Jones' upside is an entirely different. Like, I don't know what the upside is that you're anticipating. The idea that he has that mobility,
he can run the ball a little bit,
is something that we've always known about him. And the idea of bringing in your mans from Buffalo to be the head coach, right? And the idea that he worked with Josh Allen in that progression, and maybe you saw his capabilities in the progression with Daniel Jones, is another thing as well. Daniel Jones doesn't have the raw abilities that Josh Allen does. Daniel Jones did not have the upside that was projected or that was hidden within the terrible accuracy of Josh Allen. The upside on that does not seem particularly high. And then also, I don't know what level of unlocking needs to be done for him to be all that incredible. So I'm wondering, like, what is the upside that you were anticipating or that you're expecting from him? Because I think that you can get out of him solid play, but I don't think that you will be able to find, you'll go mining in Daniel Jones and find an elite quarterback that will, that you will give you a whole bunch. I think you might be able to just continue to eke out solid play. And so that type of contract that they signed him for, and the idea here that the Ringer puts forward for us, is that they are gambling on upside. And I simply don't think that that's a possibility to be found there.
You're hoping that Dable maximizes whatever Daniel Jones is. And he was discernibly better last year. And I think for Giants fans and for those who support that team, seeing that Jones actually got better with better coaching, I think gives them maybe some hope that as Dable continues to work with him, the upside will continue to be brought out by him because of the work that he has already done and the improvement that they have already seen from him. But it's going to be up to him to continue to keep the turnovers down, continue to increase the upside when it comes to his ability to throw touchdowns for this team.
Yeah.
And if he can, they may have something there. But committing $40 million per season to Daniel Jones after what was, yes, improvement, but still not to the degree that you would think someone who's getting paid that kind of money should be getting based on the production of the player.
And more power to them.
More power to them. We'll let them find out how much it was worth it to them. Speaking of worth it, the Philadelphia Eagles said, well, Jalen Hurts is worth it to us because they gave him a 5-year, $255 million contract, making a huge commitment to him. And that is what we learned from the Eagles. They believe fully in the Jalen Hurts experience. They surrounded him with talent to get him to this spot. He was able to help them get to the Super Bowl. And now they are going to make that commitment to him for the foreseeable future and see if he can continue to keep this team at the forefront of the NFC and beyond for the next several years.
Yeah, see, the thing with Jalen Hurts is like the development's already happened.
Yes.
We looked at him, and I will again evoke the name of Josh Allen and the idea of, oh man, can a player get better? And where I typically say no, particularly when we talk about accuracy, it's kind of been a truism in football. It's like accuracy is something that you can't really fix. Josh Allen said, shove that, take that, shove it in your pipe and smoke it. And Jalen Hurts came around and did that. And some of that is just like the diligent worker that he is, the coach's kid that he is. And he's already had that development, right? They're gambling, or not even gambling. They're, the idea is the mobility remains there, the ability to be like a leader guy and the worker that he is. You continue to, that's a good bet. And then also, like, he was incredible throwing deep balls last year. And once you see that happen with the talent that they've surrounded him with, obviously we can talk about the Giants and the way that they're viewing about the way that they need to surround Daniel Jones around with talent. The Eagles have already surrounded Jalen Hurts with talent. And with that talent, you've seen that he's capable of, facilitating through that. So do you need him to be an incredible quarterback? I don't know. Is he capable of being an incredible quarterback? I'm not even certain. But what he is capable of doing seems to be worthwhile to what you're trying to do. So go ahead and lock him up. Like, that's the way that this NFL thing goes. If you get a quarterback that's capable of doing what you believe is necessary, you lock him up, and that's what they did with Jalen Hurts. Another thing that I think we also learned is that they are not going to forget what the building blocks of this are, because they have managed and they have maintained the idea that they're going to keep investing in the line.
That's right.
Offensive and defensive.
Yes, both sides.
So, like, the Jalen Hurts thing is one thing. They're also making sure, like, hey, man, those pushes, right? It's not just because Jalen Hurts squats 400 pounds, which you heard on every NFL broadcast. It's because they got big boys up front that are moving that pile. And Howard Roseman and them were like, yeah. Jalen Hurts is going to keep squatting 400, but we're also going to make sure that we have guys that are agile and strong in front of them doing that as well.
For Washington, their ownership nightmare is close to being over. Enough said there. Because Daniel Snyder, it finally looks like it's about to be out the paint in the greater DMV area, which I'm sure for Commanders fans, happy day for them and their franchise and their fan base, which gets us to the Dallas Cowboys and what we learned from them this offseason, which I found this statement to be very interesting.
Yes.
They overreacted to their playoff loss. Now, remember, the Cowboys went 12-5. They've won 24 games over the last two seasons. Plus 125-point differential, was third in the NFC, just behind the Eagles and the 49ers. And, of course, they went out and got Brandon Cooks, got Stephon Gilmore on the other side on defense. But them overreacting to the playoff loss, I'm sure if you were to talk to the Cowboys organization themselves, they would say, actually, no, we're reacting properly based on what has happened to us the last couple of years, which is we lost to a more physical football team in the San Francisco 49ers, and we've been trying to get tougher, more physical mentally and physically with the moves that we have attempted to make, while also improving the talent on both sides of the ball. For Dak Prescott, another receiver. For Dan Quinn, a veteran corner to help out Trayvon Diggs on the opposite side. I thought the Cowboys reacted properly based off of their needs that they needed to address and how they were able to address them on the cheap, the way that they got Cooks and Stephon Gilmore, namely.
Well, it's funny because I thought, and Shields Kapadia, who does great work for the Ringer in writing this piece, I thought that when I read the sub-headline of they overreacted to their playoff loss, that this was going to be directed at the drafting of Mozzie Smith as, a defensive tackle in the first round, which I know a lot of people had some questions about it. Like, is that the appropriate value, those types of things, right? We don't have to relitigate that. What it seems like Shields is pointing to is actually the decision to move on from Kellen Moore. And then this is where we get into the conversation of the statistical portions of this and the things that are not quite quantifiable, like the, I guess, narrative portions of this that we've had a lot of conversations about around here. And the statistical parts of this are outside of when, Dak is not there. You look at the statistical ways that this offense performed, and it was really, really good. And so the idea that, turnovers being an issue, not all those were on your quarterback, and it was like really, almost anomalous the way that the level of, not even almost, it was anomalous the level of turnovers for Dak Prescott in particular. The idea for Shield here is just, well, you just keep going. Like, you had a great offense statistically. This was a bump in the road. Don't overreact, come back, and get stronger. And I think us locally, you can understand the logic on that while also probably disagreeing and saying there was underlying questions that we had about Kellen Moore from the jump that weren't necessarily answered. And because football is such a small sample size type situation, I understand making decisions with larger data sets is the technically smarter thing to do, but you need to have situational awareness. You need to be good in certain situations outside of just the larger data set. And it felt like Kellen Moore, in the situations where you needed the offense and everything to be perfect or be good,
particularly in the playoffs against San Francisco the last 2 years,
it didn't hold up. And so it's one of those things where I don't think anybody is like technically incorrect, but I do think that there's missing some context with that analysis when we're just talking about this from a statistical perspective compared to what you have overall. And then you start adding like the additional narrative layer of, I think a lot of people look at Mike McCarthy as, hey, dog, it's time to save your job. And if you add that level of it, when it's time to save your job, all hands on deck, particularly my hands, because I want to be able to know and control my destiny. So I think that's some of the portions that add into this. So if you want to call that an overreaction, I think that it's within your right to do that, but I think there's some logic that might be being undercut here when we say that they overreacted to their playoff loss.
From the 860, every time KG talks with belief in Dak Prescott, it makes me want to sing the no role models chorus. He doesn't want to be saved. Well, you're going to have to, tell that to a lot of people, because there's a lot of people who still believe in his ability to lead this football team. So I get the criticisms of Dak Prescott. I understand why the criticisms were leveled against him, and he cannot turn the football over the way that he did. But to Reggie's point, statistical anomaly will happen this past year in the way some of those interceptions happen. I tend to think the Dak Prescott that we have seen prior to last year, I think will come back and be able to help this football team given what he has around him. But the NFC East is going to be tough with Jalen Hurts and company at the top of the division going into this upcoming season.